Lower tier Pokemon being good in OU is as time-honored a tradition as competitive play itself. And in DPP OU, we have many examples, but even during something as tumultuous as the Salamence metagame, you saw Venusaur in high-level play. Not, all the time, of course, but it was just an example of what you could get out of a Pokemon not commonly seen if you knew how to play to its strengths. So this shoddy battle, which was the name of the simulator for those who don't know, and also a very apt name for the program, haha. It was captured live because there were no replays then. If you didn't see it live and it wasn't recorded, you had to read a log. By virtue of not having replays until the Showdown era, a lot of really important documents have been lost. I tried to look up a log of one of the battles we're going to be referencing later, and I could not find it. I don't know if it's just because Pastebin expires certain old ones, who knows, but I have my memory, so I will tell you about those. Anyway, so this live recorded shoddy battle is from the semifinals of a tournament that was taken very seriously back then and sadly no longer exists. And it is from April 2010, April 28th even, so 14 years. And even if you scroll down to the comments, yeah, look at this. Nice use of Venusaur. Wasn't expecting to see him in an OU match. Venusaur in OU is amazing. And this is in the Salamence era. And now I will also take you to the post-Salamence metagame, where Latias and Mence are gone, and Black and White is around the corner, and what things look like. So we've got our Fire, Water, Grass cores because the dragons are gone, so let's make it look like UU. And those are popular. Stall teams are popular. Fortress, Restalk, Gyarados, Blissey types of stalls. Spinef Heatran is becoming popular. And as for lower tier Pokemon, Abomasnow sees some serious use because it is such an amazing counter to the Life Orb, Starmie, and offensive Suicune that are tearing through the Fire, Water, Grass cores, as well as being part of the water part of many of those cores themselves. And there's some Crobat. Venusaur really takes off as a grass type because of its good physical bulk over Roserade and Sleep Powder, and it's a great Pokemon. And it is often paired with its best friend from UU, Milotic. And Milotic is still a great Pokemon today, as well as Quagsire. Quagsire was very much in the Abomasnow mold of being used to counter Suicune and Starmie. And things like Milotic and Quagsire still get used today. Quagsire is more physically defensive because it helps it shut down DD Pokemon. And speaking of even today we are regularly seeing lower tier Pokemon get some sort of rejuvenation or boost or discovery or something along those lines. Last year, during one of the tournaments we'll be referencing later on, there was an explosion in Donphan usage. And people realized, hey, this thing is really, really legit. And there's reinventions and all that jazz. So, the thing is about those lower tier Pokemon, though, is that those lower tier Pokemon are really good, but they're not really changing the fabric of how the game, or how the metagame is played. I mean, as good as something like physically defensive Quagsire is, I mean, it's a good Pokemon, but it's not really changing the fabric of the tier. And the three Pokemon we are going over today, Nidoqueen, Clefable, and Dugtrio, they did change the fabric of the tier. Very much so. Now, there are some points that we are not going to discuss as in-depth. I mean, obviously we're going to go over them, but I do not want to make myself redundant with these other videos I have made before. So the specifics of Clefable's rise in DPP, this is a video I made 4 years ago. And in addition to the video, then you have all these links of the replays and the important threads and whatnot. So you can go to that. I mean, obviously we're going to be going over the Clef story, especially because it relates to the other two. All three of these Pokemon are important because of how they relate to each other. Nidoqueen and Dugtrio a little less, but still. And if I think really hard. I'm pretty sure I can remember 1 or 2 Nidoqueen Doug teams, but those weren't really the impactful ones. Anyway, point being, so yeah, you can go here. You can go here if you would like the more detailed version of how Clef rose. Although I'm sure we'll have plenty here because I just can't help myself. Now, this video is not just going to be the Nidoqueen show, though, because it will also be, the rise of not just Nidoqueen, but Dugtrio, because I also do have this video about the DPP OU Dugtrio ban, but this was really just about what made it broken. If I remember, I haven't rewatched or re-listened to it. But yeah, we will be covering the entire history of all 3 of those, and how they fundamentally altered the game. Because when something like Milotic becomes more popular, then yeah, okay, it annoys something like Mixed Flygon a little. That's not really changing the fabric of the tier. It's not really invalidating previous standards. Or even if you take the Abomasnow example, Abomasnow established itself as a real OU Pokemon in that fall of 2010 when that post-Dragons metagame was establishing itself. But as good as it was, it wasn't just a hail machine. It's still not going to ruin Starmie or Suicune in OU. Whereas these Pokemon, not all in the same way, of course, and not always individually, but also both individually and in tandem with each other. So, this is your recommended viewing if you have not seen it. These videos, they are linked in the pinned comment, as is everything else. Their resources are in the description because I used to put these in the description, and then I realized that unless you say read the description, then most people won't look at it, and even then, I don't know what that's about. But yeah, they're in the pinned comment. So, yeah, this is your, not required viewing, but if you would like to hear a little more. So just like we won't be going over every specific detail of Clefable's rise, then we won't be going over every specific detail of the Dugtrio ban, because that has already been documented. So, of course, we're still going to be going over it. So, we begin with this team from Ladybug called Goodbye Generation 4, and I'm going to have to remind myself to constantly adjust the dimensions in this video. Now, I know that you don't want to be reading forum posts through a YouTube video because the dimensions are awkward and everything, but I also don't want it to be completely unlookable. Yeah, good word. Anyway, so this team of Ladybugs is the most prominent use of Nidoqueen during current generation, because the log I was looking for, or one of the logs I was looking for earlier, was Panamaxis versus Ladybug, which was the deciding game of the World Cup of Pokemon that year. It was like a little over a month and a half-ish before this RMT was posted. This was September 30th, Black and White came out like 2 weeks ago. So, yeah, the team, this was a very different time. Teams were posted on the forums as events because you didn't have to make as many teams because there were no replays. Anyway, so this is a Hailstall team that isn't really using Hail to enable Walrein or Snowcloak or anything. It's just passive damage, more widespread form of passive damage. And you got your usual suspects, your Skarmory, your Nidoqueen. What is all that about? Blissey, Spiritomb, another lower tier Pokemon. That one hasn't really stuck around. That one's a lot more niche. And then, of course, Starmie. So, Bold Starmie, too. Very early use of that. So, the reason Nidoqueen is used here, Ladybug says that it's used because it helps against SD-Roo Scizor, which, I mean, true. Not really a big threat at that time, but Nidoqueen, it just goes to show how much of a wide defensive reach Nidoqueen has. So, what is with this typing? Let's establish the basics. So, its move pool, with both rocks and T-Spikes is incredible. Okay, well, why not use Fortress? Well, other than the fact that Fortress can't be used on every team. The fact that, or Smeargle, haha. The fact is that Nidoqueen has incredible defensive typing. With it, you are resisting Fighting and Electric, two amazing types to resist, and Rock as well. So you're taking on some major threats. And you also absorb Toxic Spikes. Now, remember, at the time of the Stall team, this is a very unique advantage because Roserade Stall hadn't really taken off yet either. And that was, of course, another advantage of Roserade stall. But with Nidoqueen, then you don't have to deal with T-Spikes by rapid spinning them away with Fortress, as those aforementioned stall teams of the time did have to. Hippo, Fori, Restock Air, Restock Rotom, Blissey, Scarftar, or Spinef Heatran, the most common ones. And, you get T-Spikes down against them. If you can spin block the Fortress, not the most difficult task, then Hippo is going to be, or is Swampert on certain variants, but Hippo's going to be, in real trouble, and especially Blissey is going to be in real trouble, and even Scarftar. So this throws a huge wrench in Toxic Spike's offense just by switching in, and you also provide an amazing switch in to CBTAR Stone Edge, always a scary move. And Lucario, the most common Lucario at this time is SD, CC, Extreme Speed, and Crunch, slowly giving way to Bullet Punch for Scarf T-Tars and Gengars, and even Life Orb Arrow a little, but most of the first two. And Nidoqueen blanks that so hard, it's absolutely ridiculous, because it was always like, oh, well, Gliscor is only the only real safe one, because even something like Restock Gyarados, which answers it pretty well, is so vulnerable to rocks and sand. And with Nidoqueen, you are even more, you don't have recovery, of course, but you have even more resilience in the face of, Stealth Rock, because you resist it. So you just completely devour it, and suddenly you have this Pokemon that also, in addition to handling things like Lucario and CBTAR, quite well, you also stuff Zapdos. And speaking of anti-metagame threats at the time, Subroost Toxic Zapdos was soloing teams. And Nidoqueen, it takes 0% from Zapdos, from that Zapdos set. And even just in general, you see that you can pivot around it. And even the ability Poison Point is amazing, because what's more irritating than Flygon and Azelf and Infernape chaining U-turns? Then the pace of the teams they play on means you will not always be able to get up those hazards in order to, punish them for that. But with Poison Point, then you switch it in, and oh, whoops, there it goes. Even something seemingly innocuous like a Tyranitar Crunch has a great chance to be punished. So this is the basic idea of what Nidoqueen does, and does for the metagame as a whole. Now, most players are going to say, oh, well, that's just crazy Ladybug using crazy things. Ladybug has a very well-known reputation for using absolutely wild stuff. Oh, it's just specifically because of the Hail team and the strange demands that Abomasnow brings. But some players saw, hey, no, this is the real deal. So we will move on to this team made by Fatty, a.k.a. Brufasa, but it looks like he's gone back to his original username, which is representative of the direction of not just stall teams, or not just Nidoqueen teams, but stall teams in general, in the period of 2012, this and beyond. This was a team very, very ahead of its time, both in its general construction and with the use of Nidoqueen. But before we get into that, I also have to mention some teams that were not documented on the forums or in any logs I could find. And those center around, well, okay, technically Clefable as well, but the Clefable team I'm mentioning is going to be shown later. Whereas, but that was also not really used seriously. The Clefable team, made by Earthworm, and I think Panamax has had one as well, but again, not well documented. It was Bronzong, Scarftar, Magnezone, Clef, not knockoff or anything. Remember, this is a very different Clef. This is just, oh, it has Magic Guard. And people are just using it as another Blissey, or with Calm Mind. And then Celebi and Gliscor were the last two. And the Gliscor was specially defensive, so it could stall out things like Vaporeon and take Mixment's Draco Meteor. So this is a really old team. Excuse me, that was a little bumpy. But yeah, so that was the extent of Clef. Like, it existed technically. Some players knew about it. Heist was telling me in that fall of 2010, because we were talking about beating stall, he was like, dude, if I really wanted to counter stall teams, I would just run Calm Mind Clefable. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Too bad, it's not good against anything else, right? Ha ha. As we would come to find out. Anyway, so that was Clef. But what I was more had in mind was the presence of Doug Trio. Because you'd think, oh, this metagame around T-Tar, Jirachi, Heatran, how can Doug Trio not be good? Well, the thing is that how do you get it in? Because it's so frail. Now, there were some players who were mostly Panamaxis, and Panamaxis is a recurring player throughout this, one of the all-time greats. I mean, he was the one who faced Ladybug in that deciding World Cup 2010 game when Ladybug brought the Hail team. And Pana also made the team I'm referring to, which unfortunately we have no reference for. Just my brain. Yeah, and it was a team. I don't remember exactly how it went. I just remember there was U-turn Zapdos with the Zap Plate. That was the lead. Because Spec Zapdos lead was becoming popular because it was anti-Machamp with HP Flying. And Zap Plate gave him more flexibility so it could U-turn into Dugtrio. There was a Stealth Rock, U-turn Celebi, I believe. Then Dugtrio. I think there was a Raikou in that last slot, but or in the fourth slot, rather. But I'm not 100%. And then I think there was something like a Heatran, or no, I think there was a CB Tar actually. Yeah, no, I'm very sure now. It was Zapdos, Celebi, CB Tar, Dugtrio. I really can't remember the last two. I want to say Raikou because I think the whole thing was double electric, but I might have even been Jolteon sometimes. I know there were variants. Empoleon, that's what I was like. What was that water? Yes, and it was a Shuka Berry Empoleon. And I remember Pana was espousing the value of Shuka and Empoleon in general as a good check to things like Dragon Dancers, for offensive teams that can't always Choice Scarf beat them or, have the bulk to beat them. So, yeah, that was the team. It was Zapdos, Celebi, Empoleon, Dugtrio, T-Tar, Raikou. I believe the Raikou was Scarf because I think, and this one I'm really, please don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure it was an early test of how to get the most out of Aurasphere Raikou, because Aurasphere Raikou has to be rash-natured, and that means that it cannot be timid, obviously, so it can't go plus speed. But rash, I mean, yeah, you don't like the special defense drop, but you love that it boosts special attack, and even a rash-natured Raikou is so fast that it outspeeds the gold standard of base 100, even when they're positive. So even plus special attack Raikou will outspeed plus speed Scarf, Flygon, the big one, and Jirachi. So, Great Lake Game Cleaner. I'm pretty sure about that. Anyway, the Raikou slot. But yeah, I think there were like others with like Infernape being tested, and Infernape, maybe like Heatran, but yeah, I'm 100% sure about the Zapdos, Celebi, and Empoleon, Dugtrio, CB Tar thing. Anyway, but still, this was a good team. It was used in the Smogon Frontier, another great tournament that is no longer with us, but it didn't really have larger metagame impact because something that was very characteristic of teams made by Earthworm or many teams by Earthworm anyway. He had some teams that were more easy to use for most players, just pick up and play, but he also had the very eclectic ones. Like there's a reason why that Clefable team I mentioned never really took off. But yeah, the more eclectic teams by Earthworm, as well as many teams by Panamaxis and then Heist, they would not really take off as highly spammable teams because they were so unique in vision and so designed to their players' own personal idiosyncratic playstyle that most other players, if they tried them, they'd be like, oh, let me try this good player's team. They're like, dude, how do you use this? This is terrible. But it would work for those players. So I think that is why a lot of Pana teams in general, but that Dugtrio team never really took off. It was something that good players were aware of, like, oh, that's if you're going to use Dugtrio, that's the way to do it. It's Pana set the standard, but you don't really have it taking off as something with a lot of impact, especially because again, getting Dugtrio on the field. I mean, yeah, theoretically you turn out, but it's still not something that's very reliable. And what's another factor is that Dugtrio, or the abusers themselves, while good with Dugtrio support, are not always super lights out, even if you get that Dug Trap off. So, yeah, you really have to be very, very aware of how you use it. And most players were not on Panamaxis' level. So, yeah, that's why it didn't take off. But it was aware. So, we have, in the fall of 2010... we have Nidoqueen, Clefable, and Dugtrio all known as potential good quantities. You know, like in the fall of 2010, there was also an explosion of Venusaur Milotic usage. Apologies had this team called Team Dinosaurs, which was just a balanced, bulky offense team. CB, Azelf, Rox, Heatran, Scarfroad, pretty standard, right? Stallbreaker, Gliscor, Taunt, Toxic, and then the last slot just Venusaur and Milotic. And that was very characteristic of the metagame at the time. I mean, a lot of players would use it, with Spikes, highest out of team with Lead, Heatran, and Skarmory, and Scarfroad, and then I forget what the last was. And then Venusaur and Milotic, of course. But Venusaur and Milotic were like the popular lower tier Pokemon, whereas Nido, Clef, Doug are still not really fully explored. So now we go to this team posted in March of 2011 that we've had on the screen for some time for those who are watching. Thank you for sticking with us. So we've got Skarmory. Now, I don't want to make this sound like some sort of radical change, but yeah, Skarmory is big now because Fortress is the defining stall spiker. Because Spikes, T-Spikes, Rapid Spin, it's incredible. So the metagame would eventually go, this is a subject for another video, the metagame would eventually go in the direction of Starmie once, because in the post-Dragons era, Stealth Rock Heatran is the most popular defining Stealth Rocker, and spinning with Fortress into teams with Heatran is an uphill struggle, so, Starmie flips that on its head completely. And then at first people thought, Scarftar is going to fall off, Latias isn't around, why bother? And then people realized, no, you still needed to Pursuit Ghosts, and if Starmie's going to get popular, then you wanted that pursuited as well, especially if you're a Stealth Rocker, especially defensive Heatran on these stall teams, as it so often would become. Or Nidoqueen, because a very important dynamic for Hazard Wars in any generation is making sure your Hazard user matches up well against the Hazard preventers or removers. So you can get them up and maintain them. So Nidoqueen has a lot of tools in this vein, but yes, Nidoqueen is with fire coverage is also a rocker that destroys Fortress, and a toxic spiker that destroys Fortress. So here you see the value that was originally driving it, because this is a much more aggressive take on a stall team. You've got the second fast Pokemon in Starmie in addition to Scarf-Titar. You've got the Taunt Skarmory to wear down opposing stall and not let things like Hippo or Blissey heal off Spike's damage, or even Rest Hog Gyarados. Taunt Skarmory rewards used to be really, really big in the Platinum metagame when Taunt Skarm and Scarf-Tar were first taking off. Yeah, so yeah, we see this Nidoqueen, what it's doing. It's doing those things that we've already mentioned, but it's Fatty making a great, and I feel so terrible saying his name, but it's literally his name. He chose it multiple times. But yeah, so it's Fatty making use of those traits that Nidoqueen has, those excellent traits, and then pairing it with Rotom Wash, the standard Rest Hawk set, and then finishing things off with a Calm Mind Celebi. Now, I have to take one of my famous bathroom breaks, but when I get back, I will tell you about Calm Mind Celebi and Protect Nidoqueen. So at this time, I am talking to my friend AB2, who was friends with Fatty and Heist and a bunch of other people in that circle, like Lizard Man. So I hope just saying those names has given someone watching this a huge nostalgia rush. Anyway, so I was talking to him like, hey, this Nidoqueen thing seems really good. And he was like, yeah, actually, Heist uses Protect Nidoqueen because it scouts Flygon trying to U-turn on you. And it's like, oh my god, that's amazing. And then Heist would also go on to talk about not just physically defensive Nidoqueen, but especially defensive Nidoqueen. And how even with the specially defensive set, it was very good at switching into lead Machamp. And that is a major, major aspect of Nidoqueen's game. Its function against Machamp, both lead, because that's very important for many defensive teams. You know, many defensive teams, once they get going, are fine into Machamp because it gets worn down, it's not that fast, but it's not that bulky either. But early in the game, you don't want it messing you up. So Nidoqueen provides an amazing weapon against that, but we'll get to that more in a second. So at this time, the team is built and posted. It's definitely, praised for being innovative. I probably posted it. I did. Yeah, I mentioned Specs Heatran as a threat. I probably would not... Oh, I think I suggested Spadef T-Tar. Not a bad idea with Scarf Rotom. Yeah. And look at that. Is that not hilarious that here George182 mentions Dugtrio as a weakness? I don't know if I'd say Starmie. Well, no, yeah, it kind of is. I don't know if this is a weakness, but he suggests Scarf Shaman, also very ahead of its time. Wow, look at this. Look at this forward-thinking RMT thread. And now here comes Conflict suggesting Restalk Hariyama. I don't know about that. Wow, this is a strange... I forgot about this strangely combative post. Get wrecked. That's a very old expression. Anyway, DD-Tar, yes, threatening, but very manageable. So that's a thing about Nidoqueen that differentiates it from its fellow grounds in Swampert, Hippo, Gliscor, is that it really is not very good against DD-Tar. Now, DD-Tar started running Ice Punch, so Gliscor was kind of invalidated there too. But it wasn't just DD-Tar, it was also Life Orb Arrow, because unlike those other grounds, Nidoqueen is actually weak to ground itself. So that was something else that you had to consider when building a team with Nidoqueen. Anyway... So, Nidoqueen is still not really taking off by any means, but it's more of an, this is a documented non-Ladybug team. And I don't say that to disparage Ladybug. I say that because most people think, oh, Ladybug, you know how I mentioned those Earthworm, Panamaxis Heist teams that were so wacky that only they could use them? Yeah, people viewed Ladybug teams as similar. It's like, oh, that's that crazy Ladybug and his weird innovations using whatever wild thing he just thought up. So, yes. So Nidoqueen is now established as, hey, this can work on a quote-unquote regular team because there's no Abomasnow in sight. There's no other lower-tier Pokemon. The closest thing you get to an unusual choice is Calm Mind Celebi. And Calm Mind Celebi was becoming popular. Eo Utamortis came up with a specially defensive Calm Mind Celebi, with Earth Power to turn the tables on Heatran. And Stone Cold 22 used that against me in my first SPL. He'll never let me forget. But yeah, this one's not especially defensive, but Calm Mind Celebi was a good finisher with all that hazard support. Remember, no Clefable around. You can just out-hazard most things. Or pretty much everything, really. And yeah, I kept the Celebi thing in mind for when I was making a Nidoqueen team later on. So, now we know that Nidoqueen is more of an established Pokemon. Clefable's still not there. So, this is March 2011, right? Now, we go to March 2012, almost to the day. Wow, that's crazy. March 23rd, 2011, March 24th, 2012. So, a day and a year and a day later, then Toby 10, a.k.a. Legendary 07, that was his original name, made this team after he won this prestigious DPP tournament. I think it was called the Sinnoh Cup, Sinnoh, something like that. So, this was a team that introduced a lot to the metagame. to the wider metagame at large, or the wider player base at large. Let me combine those. Also, I think my laundry is just about done, so I might run in there for a second just to hang up this shirt that I might want to wear later. No, I'll see. I'll wait for my next bathroom break. Anyway, so yeah, Legendary 07 was a great player. He made a team in the fall of 2010, which was very representative of the game at that time. It was Rox Heatran, Spikes Roserade, Rotom Wash. I think there was a Flygon. I think SD Lucario, and I forget what the water type was. Maybe Restogera, who knows? Probably, yeah. But this team was a lot more groundbreaking because, first of all, it has a Spec Starmie lead. And I'm a big Spec Starmie fan. And, at this time, it was all Life Orb on offense, and then, the defensive teams are getting ready to start really using those. But here, you have Spec Psychic Starmie to Oko Machamp, and just generally blast through things with Hydro. And if you're facing a stall team, then they're countering you with Blissey, then boom, trick, ruined. So this is a major innovation for the tier. Not that no one had ever thought of Spec Starmie before, but no one had ever come up with a real consistent way to use it. That's a big difference. So here we've got a standard Shuka Heatran. Here we've got a U-turn Celebi. This is a big one. Celebi was really popular on these early Dugtrio teams, and we'll get to more of those in a second. But yeah, and you'll notice the U-turn Celebi, Legendary 7 saying he made this team in 2011 after being greatly influenced by my friend Panamaxis, and now we remember that team Pana made, the Zapdos, Dugtrio, Sella, CB-Tar, Empoleon, probably Raikou thing. Now, I don't know, this team really makes me doubt the fact that the last was Raikou on Pana's team, but we'll see in a second. So yeah, U-turn Celebi, and there is, of course, the Dugtrio. So seeing Dugtrio succeed like this in such a high-profile tournament, because remember, the Pana's team was not really used, to my knowledge anyway, in these tournaments where everyone was watching, and it was also a little stranger. So now people, because Zap played Zapdos, what is this? But this team has a lot more familiar faces. It's got your Firewater Grass Core. It's got Shuka Berry Heatran, which is as standard as you get for the time. So now people are starting to take notice. Oh, hey, this Dugtrio thing might actually be pretty good. So we see Dugtrio here, and we've got the Scarf Raikou. So I guess this doesn't really, the description doesn't really say anything one way or another about whether the last on Pana's team was in fact Scarf Raikou or Jolteon. I think it's Jolteon. I don't know. Point being, it was an electric type or an Infernape or some dangerous special attacker like that. For all I know, there were multiple variants, and one of them had a Super Rachi, which would have actually been quite good. So, yeah. So here we've got the Scarf Raikou, and I remember I didn't see this game live. I don't think I even read the log, or at the time we had a log to replay converter, so I didn't watch the replay. That one, yeah, sadly disappeared when we moved to Showdown. So we've got some people. We've actually got some converted replays here because there have been some wonderful people who are manually taking logs I give them and converting them to replay form. Still got some kinks to iron out, but yeah, I remember. I don't know how the game went, but I remember my teammate in this season of SPL was 6A9 Ace Matador, one of my favorite players ever. He was really great. And he faced Legendary 07, and AM, I only say this because I love him, he had a tendency to complain a little. Not about hacks, not usually about hacks, to his credit. It was just he could not get over the baffling stupidity of his opponents. And, he made the classic mistake sometimes of assuming his opponents were competent when they were not. It's a tough hill to get over, I understand. It's very hard to ground your moves in some sort of reason when, your opponent may or may not be functioning with the reason themselves, and that might change turn to turn. I've seen so many players become idiots and geniuses within 2-3 turns of each other. So, and then, flip back and forth throughout the game. Anyway, so I remember he used this season of SPL, and AM thought, oh, it's a Raikou last, so I'll just beat it with my Scarf Flygon. And the game was set up for Scarf Flygon to win, and then the last turn, Raikou comes out and just clicks HPIs and it's the complete opposite result. And I remember Anne was just shell shocked, like what just happened, and that is the strength of Scarf Raikou. And it's generally a great revenge killer because it's a special attacking revenge killer that actually crushes DD Tar because of Aura Sphere. And of course it's got amazing cleanup stab with Thunderbolt. So yeah, Scarf Raikou is a big one, and here we have the dual electric pairing of, whereas Pana's team had the lead Zapdos, this one is cleaning up. This has a second electric cleaner with Agility Roo Zapdos. This is another major threat introduced to the tier with this team. Now, the specifics are not important of the EVs or even whether you run lefties or Life Orb or not. It just, it's like, yes, Zapdos learns agility, but again, like with Spec Starmie, it's like, oh, this is how you can use agility Zapdos. This was a practical example of what you could do and how good it could be if you went to the lengths that needed for to support it. So bulky Life Orb, agility, I tried this set out and I was in love. You could go Life Orb 3 attacks, you could go lefties 3 attacks, you could go lefties Roost, whatever it is, agility Zapdos is a massive, massive threat late game. And I had the supporting cast for it. So, yeah, here's a rate from Pana, of course. So, yeah, some small part in helping you make it. Blah, blah, blah. Changing Aerial Ace. Beat up. Yeah, Bluin posting congrats for Sinnoh. So that was the name of the tournament. Sinnoh, whatever it was. Yeah. Stylish. I agree, Conflict it is. Yeah, so people are just suggesting faster Celebi to handle Lucario. Yeah. So, this team... we also move on to, at this time, actually, the same SPL. I was trying to remember because I have documents for pretty much everything here, but there are some of the things that were not documented that I have to remember. So I'm going chronologically. So, actually, the same SPL, one of the players in that match I just mentioned, the 69 Ace Matador versus Legendary 07, aka Toby 10, who posted this team. 69 Ace Matador had a Nidoqueen team he used against, I want to say, Ojama. I'm not 100% sure. But his team was, it was Nidoqueen, I don't even remember which Spiker it was. I think it was Fortress, Skarmory, I don't remember. I didn't see this replay until way later. But I remember it didn't have a Ghost, which for the spike stacking teams of the day was very rare. It was like the highest level of player knowledge that spiking teams didn't need a Ghost necessarily. It's just, well, why would I give up all my hazard progress by not having a spin block? Not that was, a hard and fast rule, because it's not like Gengar was a good spin blocker and people used Gengar on those teams anyway, just because it was such a good hazard abuser. But that was the general principle that I remember his team. I think it also had Celebi. Celebi is really popular with both Dugtrio and Nidoqueen on offense and defense. So yeah, that was, an update on where Nidoqueen is in 2012. I think that was the only instance of its tournament use in that year, barring, Ladybug showing up with Hail was, if he did that, that was just, Ladybug being Ladybug. That wasn't really a metagame thing. Whereas that team AM used, I think he had Vaporeon, I'm pretty sure. Nidoqueen, Scarftar, Fortress, Celebi, Vaporeon, Jirachi? I'm really not sure, but I remember it was a lead Nidoqueen. And lead Nidoqueen is, then you realize, it doesn't just have to be used on a team. It can also lead off because it just that all-purpose bulk, like you would lead with a Hippo or a Swampert, gives you a pretty good chance to start the game off with some hazards, with some Stealth Rock, with some T-Spikes. And yeah, Heist would also make a habit of leading off with Nidoqueen. Although his wasn't really a Stealth Rocker as much, but, getting ahead of ourselves. So, here we have, also in 2012, a few months after this is that Earthworm team I mentioned. And if the percentages look a little strange, and, the fact that the move animations aren't going off, but if the percentages look a little strange in this, I've used this replay in a video before, so don't, so we're not, going over it or anything. But yeah, if the percentages look a little strange, it's because the replays have some kinks to sort out. So, like Life Orb doesn't show up in the battle log because it doesn't show up in game in Gen 4. So let me just make sure my music is still playing. Okay, it is. Yeah, so something would say in the battle log, T-Tar did 90% to Starmie with Crunch, but Starmie was KO'd from 100%. Well, that's because of the invisible life orb. So yeah, don't get caught up on that. This is just an example of the Earthworm team in action that he was messing around with. Heist was messing around with it. Again, not really metagame impact. And again, another team with Celebi. So I did not realize just how much of a partner. I mean, I know Celebi used to be more impactful in the metagame, but it's weird because Celebi overall was not really that popular in the game, or in the metagame. I mean, yes, it was used and whatnot, but it was at its most popular with all of Nidoqueen, Dugtrio, and Celebi in these, Nidoqueen, Dugtrio, and Clefable in these early forms. That's really interesting. So yeah, again, Earthworm and Heist were using this team, in battle. Like there was this Victory Road tournament that everyone was trying, and I think they were both spamming the team. And yeah, there's Clef switching into T-Tar. What could go wrong? I don't know why I didn't superpower. No, I know why, because I expected Gliscor to switch it, because I was like, no way, he just lets Clefable. Anyway, so yeah, no one, people knew this team, but I think the only player who really noticed the potential of this team and started building something with it was Hot and Cold, who would go on to make a very impactful Clefable team later on. And I remember, before he made that one, he was experimenting with Clef because he noticed this team that Earthworm and Heist are using are really good, but your average DPP player/builder was noticing and being like, oh, that's weird. That's, why? No, that's just some weird gimmick that they're using. Anyway, so once again, I guess we praise the utility of Celebi and in providing the stability that these Pokemon need before they establish themselves. Isn't that nice? So yeah, there's that, and that's so I remember I was facing it. I was like, this thing's pretty annoying, and I remember testing the team myself, but again, I was not really taken by it. I think it might have just been. I mean, this was a team that also innovated Protect Toxic Bronzong. At the time, Bronzong's only place in the metagame. It was an important place, but it was really the only thing being used was the offensive Trick Room variant, almost always with Choice Band T-Tar and very often Mixed Dragonite, as on Lizardman's very, very impactful team. But yeah, so it's to see a defensive Bronzong and one using Toxic Protect, that whole using Protect as recovery was not just a thing of Bronzong, but would become characteristic of Nidoqueen as well. So because people would realize, hey, this Nidoqueen thing, just in general, it's kind of why people gleaned off of T-Spikes 4E, because you don't want to over-rely on one Pokemon for all your hazards. Same reason why Rock Spikes Skarmory, while good, can also sometimes bite you. So, people, at first, Rock's T-Spikes, Nidoqueen was it, but then people realized, hey, what if, we just use it for T-Spikes and throw rocks on something else and get more utility out of it, because Nidoqueen does have an amazing move pool. So, yeah, it doesn't just have, a move pool that's not really fully explored even today. Like, I think Super Fang Nidoqueen is so good alongside Taunt. Counter is really great on it. And I mean, the elemental aspect. I mean, I used to test Thunderbolt Nidoqueen quite a bit to mess with Gyarados, to dent Starmie, surprisingly. And it's actually good. And eventually, how at first it's running Fire Blast/Flamethrower for SD or Scizor, yeah, but also Fortress, and eventually those are not really as impactful, so it starts running Ice Beam because, hey, that whole Flygon that wants to switch it on you? Yeah, never mind. Suddenly you gain the ability to check Dragonite, and that's really, really enormous. Gliscor as well. You go from Gliscor switching into you to just completely, I mean, not dominating it, Nidoqueen's not that strong, but really threatening it. These are major targets. So, 2013... So this is Aneurysm is my username. I got it from a combination of the Nirvana song and the original name for Bleed by Meshuggah. Can you tell I was a teenager at this time? Anyway, so there is my lead Nidoqueen, God bless it, and it's running physical defense still. At this time, special defense Nidoqueen is not really a thing. It's just all max, because you're like, oh, I'm taking on Lucarios and T-Tars, and so the SPDEF aspect would not really be explored yet. So mine is just physically defensive, rocks, T-Spikes, and I face a Celebi lead. Look, another Celebi. I don't have one on this variant, but yeah, there are the rocks, and it's like, oh, Zach, let's go to taunt T-Spikes. We're not breaking down this game. It's just an example of what Nidoqueen does. So this was the second usage of Nidoqueen in a serious... Because the Sinnoh Cup thing of Legendary 07s and the previous tournaments, those were... I'm talking the official turn... Oh, no, that was Dugtrio, pardon. Yeah, so the second use of Nidoqueen in SPL or Smogontor or anything like that since DPP became an old generation. And the first one, I believe, was Ace Matador using Nidoqueen in that game I mentioned the previous year. So this replay is from, I believe, February 2013. So, yeah, that's where it is. So 1 year later we have this, and this is not really a characteristic Nidoqueen team. But I was very proud of it. I made it because I was afraid that Twash is my opponent. He was subbed in for Blightbringer at the last second, and I was afraid of getting hardcore counter-teamed, and turns out that they did wind up going for a hardcore counter-team because they thought, oh, BKC will use his standard SPDEF Heatran, Scarf T-Tar kind of thing. So, actually what's very funny is the way they chose to try and counter-team that, and that will lead us into our next point in the video. So... yeah, here's a bunch of goofy stuff with Gara bounce, full paralyzing my Raikou. Tragic. And, yeah, that's not a Scarf Raikou or anything. This is just... yeah, so somehow playing around that. Because this was a non-Calm Mind Suicune, so really not representative of the team. So what I want to mention while we, watch this Gara stuff going on, for anyone who is watching, is that afterwards I edited this team, and the bounce trick gets pulled off again. It doesn't show up in the log because, yeah. And after I edited this team to be more defensively stable or whatever, and I wound up using Rotom over, more boring, I guess, because it's a very aggressive version with the Gengar-Raikou combination alongside these bulky hazard setters. But yeah, Rotom over Gengar, and then, what else but Celebi over Raikou. And that was the variant of the team that was most similar to those Nidoqueens that came before. And look, for those watching the screen, there's Dugtrio. Gliscor tries to bait in my Gengar and then Pursuit Trap it with Dugtrio. So not your standard use of Doug, but of course the ability to Pursuit Gengar was one of Dugtrio's big advantages. So the fact that my Fortress has Protect is big in scouting this. This is one of my favorite games ever. It was very intense, very unique dynamics. So... yeah, there's Dugtrio, and this is what I was talking about getting into the next era of the video, because shortly after this battle, Dugtrio started becoming more popular, and people were already starting to be aware, and this is the difference between something like Legendary 07's team and what I'm about to mention, which is that... the Legendary 07 team was using Dugtrio to enable offensive threats consistently, but people also recognized Dugtrio's potential for cheese, to catch someone off guard, and yeah, to catch someone off guard and just kind of steamroll them through matchup. So that was that was why Dugtrio was brought here, because you see the team that was being used, it was a last-second counter team, as they told me afterwards. But, I mean, Dugtrio is not synergizing with Gyarados or, Gliscor. It was just... or Cibitar. Well, Cibitar, kind of, because they're both doing the trapping thing, so I take that one back. But you got the U-turn Celebi into Dugtrio, and then other things. It was just, Dugtrio traps a lot. Let's try to get some cheesy matchup good stuff. Also, Sandvale Gliscor on spectacular display here. And Pain Split not showing up as, yeah, because of the way the mechanic thing. I think the Gengar, faints to sand on screen, even though it doesn't actually faint in the log. Yeah, there it is. But it's still very much alive. So, for now, anyway, so, yeah, after this battle, And then, in the upcoming season of Smoke and Tour, M Dragon had this team, which also had Celebi. I remember it was a bunch of U-turners into Dugtrio and Magnezone and Calm Mind Rest Cresselia. So it was U-turn Rocks Gliscor, U-turn Celebi, Scarf Scizor, Magnezone, Dugtrio, Calm Mind Rest Cress. And this was an infuriating go-to piece of cheese for people just looking to grab some win. It was that classic, I don't really play DPP, but I'm going to try and snatch some wins with it because I need points in this tournament kind of deal. Much like Baton Pass would be used. It was very similar because, Dugtrio is pretty cheesy in general, but there are definitely levels of cheese. And, this use of Doug in SPL kind of anticipated the more cheesy aspects of it. There was another team that was a less cheesy use of Dugtrio that I actually quite liked. I had something very similar to it. But it was basically, I think it was M Dragon built it as well. I'm not sure, but it also had Celebi, of course. God, what is with all this Celebi? U-turn, good resistances and everything. Yeah, good Pokemon. But yeah, it was meant to remove Heatran, so Dugtrio would remove Heatran for the benefit of SD Roost Scizor, which was becoming regarded as one of the best sweepers in the game if you could beat Heatran. Now, you didn't have to Dugtrio to wear down Heatran. You could just Rocks or lure it in with Zapdos, because Heatran was often used as Zapdos Sponge. That's why Spec Zapdos was so it was so good back then. Even going back to Heist and Calm Mind Celebi, I remember he mentioned when I was on his SPL team in my first SPL 2, he was like, yeah, I like Spadev Zapdos alongside Calm Mind Celebi because Zapdos lures in Heatran and then Celebi goes crazy, so you don't even need Earth Power. So, yeah, it was a similar idea. And this team I'm talking about, the M Dragon one, maybe M Dragon, maybe Fakes. I think it was M Dragon. I'm not sure. But it was unusual because at this time, as we've established, Shuka Rocks Heatran was the standard, and this team was using Scarf because Scarf is a great abuser. Even the Legendary 07's team, the Dugtrio one, had Toby 10, they're both the same person. He just had a username change. And that was a standard Shuka Rocks Heatran alongside Dugtrio. But this one was Scarf for full abuse. So that team was Zapdos, Celebi, Starmie, Scarf Heatran, Dugtrio, and Scizor. And it was quite good. It was quite popular and effective. It was used in tournaments in SPL. But that's still a little ahead. So this next thing we're going to mention, Pana's use of Doug Clef. This is really ahead of its time, and it's a log, so we're not going to go through it. Also because this is very much on display in that Rise of Clefable video. But and I think it's probably, you mentioned in the Dugtrio ban one too? Maybe not, but either way, see here, we're not going to read the whole log, but you see Panamaxis goes to, sacrifices the fast Scarm rate to spit up Heatran. That's part of the strategy of the team. I think, yeah, it was Akka Scarm. This was, Pana was a big fan of this, then Heist would use it in Tour. Then Dugtrio comes in and removes Heatran, and now Heatran can't blow up Calm Mind Clef later. The Spiritomb here, this is a really experimental team for its time. Doug, Clef, Spiritomb? What are all these low tiers doing here? But, yeah, so, and then Clefable Calm Minds and then goes crazy. So that's basically just, and then Pana wins this tournament using Doug Clef in March 2013. So, again, we're not going to go over the details there, but it showed its power even on a very, funky team like that using Spiritomb of all things. So, hey, it counters Machamp, and you need that alongside Clef, right? Anyway, so he won, it was just standard DPPOU tournament. So, again, these unofficial but, taken very seriously by the best players, DPP tournaments. 1 year produces Clef, the next year produces Doug and Clef. So, first it produces Doug, and then it produces Clef and Doug. So, yes, there's that. And yeah, so that's Clef and Doug where they are for now. And then again, this was a battle of the week thing between Heist and Panamaxis. Heist, aka Babidi or the Grand Babito, and here he also has Nidoqueen. And see how little that Ice Beam does? It does 41%. 38 and then 41. That doesn't seem like that It still seems like a big chunk, but this is what I mean about the SpDef Nidoqueen that Heist was using, and this was a big difference. So you say, oh, well, why SpDef Nidoqueen? Because, don't you want to take in physical attacks? Well, it's that Hippo thing, where SpDef Hippowdon became the standard in DPP because it took, physical attacks so well anyway, and by investing in SpDef, you make it so, you expand what it can take so beautifully. Big differences are Heatran Fire Blast. You can take 2 of those with Hippo and Nidoqueen, and Mixed Knight Draco Meteor. You shrug that off, and these are massive threats. Gengar Shadow Ball, and considering how annoying Subsplit Life Orb Gengar was for these teams, being able to dance around it with Nidoqueen was a game changer. So basically putting SpDef on Nidoqueen is basically letting it act like SpDef Hippowdon, but with the advantages of Nidoqueen. And there's also the fact that now you are more able to pivot around Zapdos, because you are not as Subaroo's Toxic is kind of not as popular at this time. It was still used, and that aforementioned SD Roost Scizor was so scary because Subaroo's Toxic Zapdos, no Heat Wave, no special attack investment, Roost Scizor just sets up all over you and destroys you. But it's starting to run HP Ice more, like on that SD Roost Scizor Zapdos Dogtrio team mentioned. That was an offensive Zapdos. But yeah, so Nidoqueen can now take HP Ices a lot better, and just you can even stay in against Starmie if you want to force the issue. If you don't want to just be forced into going to your Scarftar or your Rotom or whatever, then you can stay in and you can chunk it with EQ. You can maybe Poison Point on an attempted Rapid Spin and make things really hairy for it. So yeah, there's that. And there's the fact that going SpDef does not prevent Nidoqueen from performing its amazing, important function of taking on Machamp. I think it was something like 56 SpDef EVs prevents you from getting 2 KO'd by Ice Punch. And that way you still have a ton of special limits. 56 SpDef EVs on a careful or sassy Nidoqueen. And there's with Protect as well. And Protect, we know, is good because not just scouting Flygon, scouting Choice in general, but just fiending for that recovery is such a huge deal. And yeah, it's the reason why Advanced Swampert or Heatran across a number of generations, they don't have recovery, but they so consistently stay healthy. And Nidoqueen just basically does the same thing. So yeah, another thing about this team is not just that it's using SpDef Protect Nidoqueen. Protect Nidoqueen wasn't on display in this game, just the SpDef, but this is the team that Heist would then use, the double blob, the Blissey Clef, for years, and that was Protect Nido. Anyway, and Panamaxis is using an offensive team also with Celebi. What is with all this Celebi? Good lord. So, yeah, Gengar blows up on Blissey, and yeah, now Clefable comes into Suicune, because at first, now we think of Clefable in modern DPP when it's running Calm Mind, bold, max HP, max defense, you counter Gyarados, all that stuff. But you see how little that Hydro did? That's because the original Calm Mind Clef was calm. It was super SpDef, so you could counter things like Starmie, Life Orb Starmie, and still, go for the Calm Mind sweep, and you weren't really thinking about its physical defense. And then, of course, with that principle of just like you SpDef Nidoqueen and you make it so much better at taking special attacks, you Fizzdef your Clef, and you make it an absolute amazing physical hit taker. So here comes Clef, ready to Calm Mind and Soft Boiled, and yeah, he's just trying to dodge the Magnezone bomb. There's Life Orb Arrow, another forgotten threat. And yeah, so Suicune, Clefable, it's just trying to Soft Boil on an explosion, because if you Calm Mind on T-Bolt and then you're in boom range. God, I forgot how riveting this game was. So, Sandvale Gliscor dodging the HP Ice. Yeah, just also a reminder of how miserable it was to face Sandvale Gliscor. But yeah. Oh no, there was an HP Ice zone. It was in 2 KO range, that's all. So, yeah, Clefable Calm Minds as Suicune gets KO'd by the Sandstorm, because it was worn down into that range by Poison. And, I mean, we'll get to Nidoqueen's T-Spikes being useful later on, and how when we get to the point where we discuss how they changed the game, and how they continue to affect the game, that's what it is. So, Yeah, Pana has that great lost message of tears streaming down his face. Anyway, so 2013, and then in 2014, there's some more messing with Clefable, most famously in Tsung versus what's his name, Soulwind and that Smoking Tour. That team built by Hot and Cold. We're not going to go over it in detail, but it's this one. Yeah, this Hot and Cold team also had Crobat. Hot and Cold was a great team builder. And he crafted this Calm Mind Clef team at a time where Calm Mind Clef did not exist at high-level play. And so the stall team someone's using, it's actually my old stall team. So it's just a great example of, these kinds of stall teams just became completely unviable with Clef. Because they were just, they're good against everything else. Remember earlier I mentioned you can out-hazard everything, but you can't out-hazard Clef. So, yeah, that's, so 2014 didn't see much serious Clef usage. Saw a few more Nidoqueens. I remember there was some discussing about, making Nidoqueen like a standard, giving it an analysis on the website, all that. But, yeah, not that much. It was just, Nidoqueen was becoming more established as like a good player thing. It was used, Heist, oh, right, Heist had this team at the beginning of 2014. He was using it in SPL. It was... God, it totally slipped my mind until now. That team was Heatran, Nidoqueen, Offensive Milotic, Scarf Lucario. Yeah, so that was another use of Nidoqueen. Yeah, so like that log we just skimmed through with Nido and Clef, that would become characteristic of how both of them would be used. But for the time being, they were not, going hand in hand every time. Nidoqueen was used on all sorts of non-Clef teams. Clef was used on all sorts of non-Nido teams, as we have just seen. So yeah, early 2014, Heist used that against Iconic, I believe. Yeah, and it was a Spinef Nidoqueen that stayed in and withstood a Starmie Hydro Pump. I want to say it was a Life Orb Starmie Hydro Pump. Yeah, and the Heatran was Custat Berry, and I think there was a Rotom, Scarf Luke, Offensive Milo, and then something I don't remember. But yeah, so that was, Nidoqueen now being more and more established as, oh, this is like that thing good players use occasionally. Now it is becoming more and more, a use here and there, but it's a very public use. So people are recognizing as, oh, this is it. And then with that game of Tsung versus Soulwind, then that was really saying, oh, wait, no, Clef is the big time. And then after that, just a few months after that, it's early 2015. And if we go down into these, yeah, so, oh, actually I forgot, right after Tsung used Hot and Cold's Clef team against Soulwind, Sweep used a Clef team of mine against Tsung. I forgot about that. Cool, good job, Kev. Yeah, so this replay where the Clef meets its unfortunate end in the face of Seed Flare special defense drops. But this I think was a major difference in that. Oh wow, this team was using Quagsire too. I forgot about that. But yeah, Clef, excuse me, the Calm Mind Clef previously used by Pana, by Heist, by Hot and Cold on the team he gave to Tsung. That was Spinef Calm Mind Clef, and what I believe mine was physically defensive to help with things like Gyarados and whatnot. And you see there how powerful Bold Calm Mind Clef is in terms of when you put Bold on Clefable, you just give such, it's the same idea as with Blissey, not as drastic of course, but Explosion doing 62 to Clef, that's absolutely ridiculous. And then afterwards it's shrugging off banned Flygon Outrage, doing 64, my god. So, and that's what gets it into this situation to begin with, because if it was Calm, then yeah, so this was a Bold Calm Mind starting to be messed around with. And, yeah, so then you see, so this, right here, Tsung using a Hot and Cold's Clef team against Soul and Smoke, this is fall 2014. And then these, all of these, SPL 6, this is literally right after it. This is early 2015. Honestly, I even forgot Badouche's Clef team used against Fakes, so I forgot he was really the first. But I think his was really troubled by Breloom. That was the issue in this game, yeah. But this is a great... Oh, it even used my Lodic. This is a very ahead of its time team. I think with some adjustments it would have been fine against Breloom. But yeah, this was Rock's Encore. Yeah, not really using knockoff yet. And I forget, people were arguing about who invented knockoff Clef here. I trust August on this, just because I know, whenever someone says... Well, actually, I won't get into that. But yeah, knockoff Clef... Yeah, Vil was experimenting with a lot of weird stuff, so I believe the knockoff Clef thing, and yeah, so we're gonna give the knockoff Clef thing to Vil if we can attribute it to anyone, but I know it was starting to get experimented with around this time. Thomas says he can't remember, but he didn't get it from fakes. Who knows? Yeah. But the first knockoff Clef used in SPL, that we can see, we don't know who came up with it, but we know that it was used by Tamahome, aka Draco Malfoy. And he used that against Fakes. And this was the first Clef Mirror against Fakes' Calm Mind variant in a very, very, very long game. Also, Nidoqueen. Yeah, so, Thomas' team is unusual because it's got Magnezone Gengar. I like the offensive spin on the Nido Clef, which, again, at this time is not really an established style. I mean, used before, yes, but not Nido Clef the style as we know. It's just, a team that has Nidoqueen and Clefable. There's a big difference. Where, when you have Nido Clef the style, it's just a standard. You might see it in the sample teams. It's representative of what the metagame is. And otherwise, it is just two Pokemon used together. Like if I paired, I don't know, Heatran and Lucario, that doesn't make it a Tran-Luke team, They might not be a pairing, they might just be used to, or they might even be a pairing, but, you get what I'm saying. Anyway, so this was the knock Clefable, and then Fakes uses Calm Mind, and blah, blah, blah. We have established this in the Rise of Clefable video. And, yeah. So then this is Heist's balanced Clef team here, which was very popular. He used it a bunch of times, and then I remember Husk used it against TV Rocca in the following World Cup that summer. And this team has Calm Mind Clef. Why did I say it was Calm Mind in the description? Huh, I guess I was wrong about that. But yeah, this Clef does not have knockoff yet. It's just Seismic Toss, T-Wave, and I don't know what the last was. Maybe it already had knockoff at this point. Maybe it did because the Gliscor had knockoff. So I might have... I guess we're revising that little incorrect bit of history. I was certain that this Clef had Calm Mind for some reason. I must have just overlooked it. But yeah, Clef Venusaur, big here. And then also in this video, later on, we see the Ladybug. Look how this comes almost full circle, if you want to call it that. You've got the Venusaur that was popular in 2010 against this, and the New Age Clef stuff against Ladybug's original Nidoqueen stall team. So isn't that beautiful? So yeah, that was also from this SPL. So early 2015 is when Clef is really taking off and starting to be used alongside, and using knockoff, aka the Clef we all know and many of us hate now, and being used alongside Nidoqueen more. And yeah, so the way they have affected the game, we're getting to that, don't worry. So that is 2015. And then also in 2015, we are not just talking about Clef and Nidoqueen, but also Dugtrio, and we will return to that after my bathroom break, as well as me quickly hanging up the laundry. So we left off Doug Trio regarding that Zapdos, Scarf, Heatran, SD Scizor team. That was throughout 2014. That was also used, a couple times. I remember I gave Atticus my version of it to use in SPL, and it won. And there were like a handful of uses of it in Smoke and Tour, I'm sure, but nothing too impactful. I think Fakes used it in that same SPL, I think. Not 100% sure on that. But yeah, so again, it's this kind of thing where like, oh, well, it might pop up sometime. And there was a brief period where balance players were really afraid of running into that cheese team of M Dragons, which thankfully didn't have a real serious use for... Sorry, I just got a text that it has... Dude, what are you doing? Anyway, yeah, okay, so, the SPL, it did not get used really in SPL because it's a very risky team, and you fall flat on your face, and that was not, those kinds of things were not as popular, but you see these, more reliable Doug teams as being used more. And then in 2015, then you see this team that TV Raka, aka Parengon, is using against Fakes, and... It's not a big fancy team or anything, but it's got, lead Infernape. You got the pursuing of, I think this is a Scarf T-Tar. Yep, there it goes. And so down goes Starmie, rocks stay up, and T-Tar sacrifices itself to Breloom, and down it goes, and now in comes Doug Trio to finish off the Loom. There's that Tar-Doug synergy. I mean, I know it's not banned like on the Pana team, but... beautiful 2-for-1, and look at that, it's even supporting an SD Scizor, which I think this one, yeah, the SD Scizor generally ran Bug Bite because it was better, but some players had the, Rocks Grass Knot Infernape, wow, I forgot that was ever used after 2009, but yeah, so down Pert goes, and now even Doug Trio finishes off and now you're starting to see the issue of Doug, where if it was like a Flygon or something, if I have a Flygon check, I can go to it. But here you're just forced to lose the Swampert. Yes, the Douglas Trio. Sounds like a good jazz band I'd go see. And that can be big as long as you can handle whatever sets up on your Doug. But I mean, we'll get to that Doug issue later. But yeah, as some SD Scizor teams would run U-turn on Scizor to more easily get Doug in on Heatran, because that is, I mean, double switching is great and all, but it's risky. It's way riskier than in Advance, where everything's so much stronger. Because everything's so much stronger now. Things are not stronger in Advance, the other way around. But yeah, and TV Raka is demonstrating another double trap team, but this one's a lot more reliable than the M Dragon Crest stuff, because it's running generally good Pokemon and not just a million U-turners into trappers, and yeah. So you've got the great cleaning duo of Scarf Flygon and SD Scizor, so you can go any which way, the immediacy or the boosting sweep. So yeah, down goes T-Tar, and this one does in fact run U-turn. And again, another trap for Doug Trio, so you're starting to see the power of it into this Scarf Jirachi even, and actually, Agility 3 attacks Zapdos would be death here, but yeah, this one is Specs, I believe. So, yeah, that was that game. So this team did not really take off. I remember I got it live. I don't remember if the video's still on the channel or not, but yeah, this is another example of what Doug Trio's place in the metagame is like now and in 2014, and that it's this Pokemon that can kind of be disruptive, but generally not something you're going to be seeing a lot. So then we progress into 2016, and here we have a game where Toph unknowingly uses my own team into me, but this is such a beautiful encapsulation of Nidoqueen's whole thing. Even though you have Clef to ignore the T-Spikes, Nidoqueen absorbing T-Spikes means that my Scarf T-Tar won't be bothered by them, unless the Swampert roars it in, before it roars in Nido, but thankfully Nido gets roared in. So yeah, this is just another example of, the Crocoon was not really popular at the time, but that one didn't really take off. The rest of the core of the team, that was what became popular. But I was a big fan of what Crocoon did. And yeah, so the core that you see here, the core of the team in Nidoqueen, Clefable, Scarm, T-Tar, and the last is not Rotom. It's Gliscor, yeah. I mean, that could be used today. You slap in some Rotoms or Latiases, whatever. So this was where the game was going in terms of Nidoclef. And I really want to highlight it because, again, at this time, this is April 2nd, 2016. But I wanted to highlight this because this is a continuation of where we were before. As in, Nidoqueen is a good Pokemon. Nidoclef, it's a good style. It's proving itself to be tournament. This is from Smoke and Tour. So these are tournament-worthy styles. They're successful. They're very irritating. As here you see Subaru Zapdos, famous for stalling out pretty much everything, but it's not going to get the job done against Clef. So, and, I mean, yeah, it'd be really tough for it to pull this off. And now the knockoff's going to go off, and there it goes. And this is the power of Clef we all know today. But yeah, Nidoclef is here, and it's starting to take off, and other players are starting to notice, hey, this is something good. Heist continues to use his Nidoclef team. He used it in 2015 a lot. Other players started messing with it in 2016. I remember there was one game where but the thing is, it kept being that whole thing where someone would try to use a Heist team and it wouldn't really work out. I mean, Heist had a way of working around the fact that he had no water resist, which could be abused by CB waters, but sometimes it was just too much. And there was a game where someone else used used CB Pert into that stall team, and it just clicked Waterfall a million times, and that was that. But yeah, so 2015, 2016, it still keeps getting used, and it's legitimate. You're seeing it in SPL and all, but we're not quite, at the stage of, it's settled. These Pokemon have settled into a place much akin to the Venusaurs and Milotics alluded to at the beginning of the video. Good lower tier Pokemon, but sometimes people would say, dude, what are you using all these lower tiers? Pairing an NU Pokemon, Nidoqueen, with the UU Pokemon. It's just lower stats and not as good matchups. Like, yes, on occasion, fine, but, you can't use them consistently. And this is what I mean, though, that they are starting to shift the game. You saw, I think this team of mine, I mean, I'm a little biased, obviously. The possibility for Toph's team to break through the Clefable stuff is definitely there, but you really have to adjust the movesets. And that is the kind of mass shift, the kind of change in the metagame that I'm referring to when I say that these lower tier Pokemon completely changed DPP-OU. And we'll get to that in detail, of course, but something like this, which is a perfectly strong, standard, solid T-Spike's offense team, just struggles so immensely into Nidoqueen Clef stuff, and I mean, even post Latias, Latias is not nearly as much of an issue because it is not nearly as immovable. So that's that is the basic shift of how Nidoqueen and Clef, change things. And it's not just T-Spike's offense, obviously. It's not like just one style. But the difference is, basically, when something like Quagsire comes along and annoys your Pokemon or your team style, whatever, it's really not going to completely invalidate them. And I still don't think T-Spike's offenses are completely invalidated, but they are so much harder to choose. Now, if you bring them to a tournament game, it is a serious risk. And beforehand, if you ran them, then it was not nearly so much of a risk. Anyway, so it's early 2017 now, another SPL, and here you see Philip7086, a highly innovative player, bringing Nidoqueen alongside a very unusual water spam team because it looks bulky, but then it's got Rain Dance Kingdra, and then it's got a Calm Mind Rest Suicune later. I actually covered this game on my channel when it came out in January 2017. If you want to go look it up, I highly recommend it. It's a great game. But yeah, this is another example of how, nowadays when we think of Nidoqueen, we don't really think of it without Clef. But even back as 2017, then Nidoqueen is just still in that place it was in previously. So, and now T-Tar's going to trap the Abomasnow, another underrated Pokemon. And I mean, even the use of Abomasnow is changed by the prominence of Clef. Previously, it was all Spadef, Leech, Protect, Ice-Shard. I had a team I loved with that. An Abomasnow Nidoqueen team, even. It was a complete offense killer. Nidoqueen, Scarf, T-Tar, Bronzong, Protect Bronzong, Starmie, Rotom, Abomasnow. It absolutely, I mean, the amount of free wins I got against standard offense was ridiculous, but Clef just invalidates it. And I remember Fakes would take that team and use it in SPL, and it was similarly just such an amazing matchup into offense. And yeah, but you can't run that Abomasnow set when Clef is running around. You have to, that's why Abomasnow, now if you want to run it, it's got to be like Adamant Woodhammer so you can actually threaten Clef. You know, and the complete, it's just such a huge paradigm shift. That's why they're completely upending the game as we know / knew it, because nothing else just completely ignores all passive damage like this. You know, and Nidoqueen was such a great enabler of it. And Nidoqueen as well, with its unique traits, is completely shutting down. I mean, like, take something like, let's say Quagsire or Abomasnow, right? Quag and Abomasnow are great into offensive Starmie, offensive Suicune. They did not kill these Pokemon on their own. Now, I'm not saying that Nidoqueen alone ruined Subtoxic Zapdos, but being such a big fat 0 into it really, really helped it along. So, and I mean, Clef obviously didn't help matters much either, but there's a reason why Subaru Zapdos eventually started dropping Toxic, which previously, oh, that's like the best move, and now it had to run HP Ice, you know, so Nidoqueen was a major, major part of that. You know, it wasn't Breloom, whatever, Toxic Zapdos still was dominating Breloom one-on-one. No, it wasn't that at all. So, yeah. Early 2017, we still got this Nidoqueen. It's, you know, such a great Pokemon, doing its usual things, and honestly, the Nidoqueen and Clef actually kind of messes with Nidoqueen as well, but the fact is that, and we'll get to that later on when Latias returns, but yeah, here is the really pivotal point of the video I wanted to mention. Not the fact that Suicune swept here, but instead the fact that, okay, Suicune's about to sweep. I think he's just going to go for like a freeze and then, yeah, no, there it is. Yeah, so it's this post by Oglem. So let me, yes, I remember to expand the dimensions. Okay, I will not read this entire post because it's long, because it's one of my characteristic metagame novels. But yeah, Oglemi made this post asking what the heck is with the huge increase in Clefable and Nidoqueen usage. Surely they're still pretty niche. You know, because at this point in the metagame, people are realizing, you know, it's an in-between period. It's not yet at the point it would become where, oh, Nidoqueen, Clef is a broken combination, but it's definitely past that, oh, they're just, you see them on occasion, like you would a Quagsire or something. Or, you know, Venusaur, Milotic, whatever. You know, they're becoming more and more and more popular, and reliably use at the highest level. Because, you know, some lower tier you use early on in a team tournament when it's not life and death if you lose, but once you get to the later stages of the tournament, that cutesy stuff disappears. And Clef and Nidoqueen are now just as viable contender for those serious, most serious matches as anything else. So Oglemi's asking, wait, aren't they still pretty, you know, specific, pretty niche? You know, it's not like Nidoqueen is being used, you know, just for Lucario. It's not like, there was a period where Lucario was considered, it wasn't actually considered broken. It was actually a very funny story for a video. Let me quickly write that down so I can do it later. But yeah, there was a period where Lucario was very popular, and that's where the meme came from. Oh, what's the last Pokemon in DPP? Oh, it's always Lucario. And yeah, it is obviously not always broken, not even close. But yeah, so, oh, that's why Nidoqueen's popular. So once Lucario goes down, Nidoqueen will go down? No, not at all. And there was this idea that Clefable was passive besides T-Wave, And this is the big paradigm shift I'm talking about. These Pokemon, and this is the rough synopsis of the post, as I remember, without rereading it. But basically, there was this idea that defensive Pokemon are generally passive. But the reason Nidoqueen and Clefable are so good is not because they are just Blissey-esque blobs who try to sit on everything in their path, but because they actively choke you out. Nidoqueen from, the Protect, Scouting, Choice Pokemon, which are everywhere. It's like, oh, well, let me blow something up with my Specs Heatran. Oh, well, now I know what to pivot to. With I know it's not going to Earth Power my Scarf T-Tar, so I can catch the Overheat and I can Pursuit it for a little bit of damage. Things like that. You choke out the Choice users. You rack up Sand damage. T-Spikes put so many offensive things on a timer. It's crazy. It checks a million things. But it's not just about checking those million things, permanently. Not like Blissey, which soft-boiled forever until it runs out of soft-boileds, which it probably won't, against special offense. It's checking things and then putting them on a timer. Yes, with indirect damage, with passive damage, but you are doing it immediately in response. So it's not just like, oh, switch in and eventually you'll be overwhelmed because you're not pressuring the opponent. No, you are pressuring the opponent. And Clefable is also pressuring the opponent with knockoff. And T-Wave was a lot more popular on Clef when it was first used, but that's not really the point. The point is that it is similar in that you don't just check things with it, you check things and you use those opportunities that you get from checking things to choke the opponent out. So you are on a very fast ticking timer. And when you pair them, obviously it's beautiful. Clefable loves Nidoqueen sponging fighting moves. Clefable switches into annoying status or water attacks aimed at Nidoqueen. It's... together they check such a huge portion of the game. Of course, it's a wonderful combination. So that, I think, is the biggest paradigm shift. And maybe not just DPP, but the game as a whole, where we don't think, oh, well, we don't think that's a passive wall. We think that is a wall, but it's not passive. Not to say that there aren't some walls who are passive, of course, but... you can compare it to something like, let's say, Celesteela, maybe. Nidoqueen is more comparable to Celesteela in Gen 7 because, yeah, it takes hits from things, but it's also leech seeding you and wearing you down. And Protect helps compensate for the fact that it doesn't have real recovery. And Clef is Clef, of course. It's just Fairy type. But... yeah, the idea is it's not just that they're taking the hits, but that they are, the word passive was thrown around for a lot in the mid-2010s. Because anything that wasn't people were saying, let's not use passive teams. Oh, passive Pokemon are exploitable. Yes, passive Pokemon are exploitable, but they would often conflate defensive Pokemon with passivity. So, incidentally, this is why Celebi fell out of favor, why we haven't seen it in a while, because... a lot of Celebi sets wound up being, decent hit takers, but not passive because they didn't exert real pressure, whereas Nidoqueen and Clefable are exerting insane pressure right off the bat. You think, oh, it's not that big. No, it is a big deal. So let me just make sure I'm not overwhelming or overlooking anything. So yeah, Nidoqueen's not just Lucario check, physical, special events, a mix depending on your team. It's very hard to KO. Oh, that's a huge... God, how did I forget this? You know what? Actually, no. This actually makes my point stronger. Nidoqueen has single-handedly, even before Latios, dropped Infernape from its previous place as the king of the tier. Nidoqueen has made Infernape so forgettable, I forgot that it used to be such a huge threat. Talk about impact. I saw it happen in real time, and I still that's how much, Nidoqueen, this NU Pokemon, eclipses Infernape, which was such a dangerous attacker that some people genuinely thought, yeah, this is kind of uncounterable. So, good lord, I needed this post from myself to remind myself. So, Infernape, like I said, considered pretty much uncounterable. And special mix, physical mix, choice band, nasty plot, whatever, some mix based on your team, whatever you want to do, is so difficult to answer for everything because there is not really a catch-all check. Starmie, oh, U-turn. Even Life Orb Grass on the switch. Gyarados, oh, rocks. Nothing else really good. And even if you think you're going to get by with Tentacruel, which most of the time you're not going to use, then you're going to still run into a lot of trouble based on... Actually, just Choice Band. It's not even good in a Choice Band. Rocks are up, Sand is up, you get U-turned on, and you're going to get absolutely slammed. So, that's the thing with Nidoqueen. U-turn... I think I did remember mentioning punishing the U-turns of Infernape when we first talked about Nidoqueen in 2011 and Poison Point, but that's definitely not the impact here, where Choice Band Infernape previously was one of the scariest Pokemon for stall teams, because early in the game, what do you switch into it? The closest you get to a good switch is like Hippo or Gliscor, and neither of them want to take Infernape stabs, neither of them want to take Special Mixape. You think, oh, it's Choice Band. Oh, whoops, never mind. Hippo just got, Fire Blasted, and you don't want to stand for the subsequent Grass Knot, so your Hippo's at roughly half health, and you're just going to be picked off by everything, and there it goes. And, Gliscor just gets obliterated. So, to say nothing of the fact that they also don't like the sheer power of Choice Band Stab. So... Or getting U-turned on into Breloom. That's another thing. Its U-turn was so scary, not just because it chunked its checks, but because it enabled its teammates. U-turn out of Hippo into Breloom. Terrifying. Infernape Breloom stuff was dominating the tier. And Nidoqueen, not only it resists Stealth Rock, it resists U-turn, and its Poison Point punishes U-turn. Absolutely incredible. And if you get close combat, okay, you resist close combat, great, and you punish close combat. Flare Blitz, it's going to do a chunk, and it's not just going to, rack up a bunch of recoil, but then you protect and you're fine, and you also Poison Point on Flare Blitz, so you really wind up KOing it badly. So, and it has a higher HP stat than Gliscor, so it's much scarier than, it induces more recoil on Infernape. But also the fact that, Gliscor getting U-turn on, it's rocks neutral, U-turn stings it, just a little bit. So it basically neutralizes leftovers. And then Nidoqueen doesn't care about that at all. So, and even, what if it's Special Mixape? Well, that's where Specially Defensive Nidoqueen comes in. And with Protect, it is just dandy at taking those Fire Blasts. And with Protect, stalling everything out in Sand. So, yes, another major paradigm shift. Life Orb Gengar, Nidoqueen is not the only reason Life Orb Gengar stopped being spammed, but, one of the other reasons that Will-O-Wisp Gengar became so much more popular was because otherwise Nidoqueen's just going to dance around it. Taking Starmie, can switch into Scarftran. Here's something that I mentioned on my stall team, which I have to dedicate a video for as well. It's called I Crawled, and I think I mentioned it in the Fable video. Pretty sure I did, actually. Even the same replay we're going to check, because it is significant. But yeah, the idea is if you lead with T-Tar and then switch to Machamp, or switch to Nidoqueen against lead Machamp, then your Poison Point, you're inducing Poison Point, you're wearing it down very quickly, and what would otherwise be the hardest punish to T-Tar lead there is now just, not much of a threat at all. So, Protect, it's so annoying for offense, they can't be choice or they're useless, it's good for recovery, blah, blah, blah. Unlike Swampert and Hippo, its grass neutrality is helping it take on Breloom, which Gliscor can also do, but Gliscor cannot also take on Shaman, which is a big threat at this point. And the wide coverage, which we already mentioned, can target whatever we want. It's so good with hazards because flying Pokemon, you target with Ice Beam and pair with Stealth Rock, you're fine. Even Thunderbolt if you really want. And, I was a big fan of Roar on Nidoqueen to really lay down the hurt with hazards. And grounded Pokemon are obviously getting worn down fast as sin. So, yeah. Nidoqueen, here's the final line, which is important. It would definitely be OU these days if tiers weren't frozen, which is something I think players might not appreciate about Nidoqueen nowadays. Now, Clef, would be OU is, very obvious considering that people want to ban it to Ubers, so obviously it's got insane usage. But, yeah, here's the overall point. This is that paradigm shift we're talking. Not passive as you'd think, because Thunder Wave and Knockoff defeating both offensive and defensive teams respectively. Nowadays, Clef pretty much never runs T-Wave, but it doesn't even have to threaten offense. Inability to get worn down. That's the thing. The fact that you cannot chip it means that, passively, means that it can spend more turns harassing you with its move pool. So that's what makes it so annoying, because it's still very bulky. It's not like it has to. It's so much less bulky. You know, like if it was Cleffa, let's say, yeah, it could probably take 2 hit, or not Cleffa, Clefairy. Cleffa, I don't know about that. I have thought about a Clefairy Clefable team. It's, yeah. Anyway, the whole thing is, I'm sure you could take, hits from some OU Pokemon, but you'd have to be soft boiling and protecting constantly, so you're never actually threatening. Whereas with Glef, you're shrugging things off. Spidef most known for taking on Special Off and Emp and Zap. And the thing with Suicune is that, with T-Spikes, you think, oh, well, normally I'm going to shrug off Zapdos and pulling on all this other stuff with Blissey, but, oh, never mind, T-Spikes are down. There's the whole Fortress conundrum. And now when you have Suicune staring you down with T-Spikes down, it makes no difference to Clef. Whereas with Blissey, oh, now I'm in trouble. With Clef, thanks for wasting a slot on T-Spikes. To say nothing of the fact that Nidoqueen is now around to pick up those T-Spikes. Nidoqueen was also used on some Blissey stall teams, but not as popularly. But I remember there was some Blissey, Skarmory, Starmie, T-Tar, Blissey, Scarftar, Gliscor, stuff like that. I think Nidoqueen might have been used over Gliscor, but you get the gist. Yeah. This is like 2014, yeah. Oh, yes, of course. I'm thinking of August. August had a stall team. I don't remember the exact year. It might have been 15, 16. I think it was 16, yeah. August had a stall team which was running... it was Blissey, Skarm, Starmie, Nidoqueen, Zapdos, I think. I forget, but yeah, he had a team like that, and then we would make like some more Nidoqueen Zapdos abuse later. But his was bold Zapdos, and it was Bliss, Flamethrower Bliss for SD Scizor. I remember that much. Yeah, Bliss, Skarm, Starmie, Scarftar, Zapdos, Nidoqueen. Bliss, Skarm, Scarftar, Starmie, Zapdos, Nidoqueen. Yeah, that's 6. Thought I was going crazy for a second. Anyway, so. Yes, you are just nullifying T-Spikes, and not just T-Spikes, obviously, Spikes and Sand, so, just, that is what I was talking about earlier, about completely ruining, that kind of support for those special offensive Pokemon, or you see even something like Leech Seed Shaman. Shaman, big threat with Seed Flare, oh, Blissey walls it, never mind, Leech Seed makes Blissey completely, a liability, because you siphon its own health off for yourself. Venusaur was very annoying for stall teams in the same vein, but it also picked up T-Spikes. That's why Heist was using it all the time. He had the strategy where he would sleep something with... he would leech a Blissey and then switch to Infernape, but even if it's Seismic Toss, then the Leech Seed would out-heal the Seismic Toss. And obviously Venusaur picks up T-Spikes, which are otherwise annoying for Infernape. So, yeah, that doesn't really work against Clef at all. So that's why you don't see Leech Seed in DPP, unless it's coming from Breloom, which can use Leech Seed because it threatens Clefable. So... yeah, the Spidef sets are the most common, but you can also be bold, best on Calm Mind, where T-Bolt makes it good at dealing with Gara, a major threat, because at this time we don't have Latias, so you got those water-resistless stall teams at the mercy of CB Pert and CB Gara, if you're not careful. And support variants, backup versus special attackers, but being more resistant. Oh, T-Tar Pursuit is another thing, because another way that people would scramble to deal with Calm Mind Clef is, oh, let me superpower it with my Scarftar, and I know it's going to switch, so I'm going to Pursuit it. And that works pretty okay, if you're really good, against Spidef Clef, but against defensive Clef, then it just kind of bounces off. And even superpowered, I don't remember what the calc is against Calm Clef, but against Bold Clef, it's like not even close. So, resistant T-Tar Pursuit. Oh, you soft boil off Heatran Explosion. You remember that earlier example where Clef shrugs off the Magnezone Boom. Heatran, similar story. Flygon, D-Knight, other stuff. Oh, you also are an amazing counter to Ironhead Jirachi with Bold, because you are immune to all the passive damage Jirachi's paired with, and it's like a 6-hit KO. Ish with with possible 6-hit KO with 0 attack, and even max attack, which is rare, is a possible 5-hit KO. So, and because Clef can't full para, Gen 4 Magikarp works like that. They changed that in Gen 5. So, yeah, hard to break, checks a lot. So that is how they changed the game, and we see this. We're not going to go through it. again, because again, this is in the DPP, in the Clef video, but this was, I think, maybe the first big stage appearance for I Crawled, the stall team I mentioned. Because I was listening to a lot of Swans at the time, so I just went with that. And that's the name I laddered on in the fall, and it started picking up, and yeah. So this original, yeah, it's been used a lot. The first version had like Pasho T-Tar to help with those annoying waters, but here's Nidoqueen switching into T-Spike, switching into T-Tar to T-Spike, and then Protect, and then switch out, and it's all gravy. Clef already did some knockoff stuff and just gonna sit on. I mean, and look, it's going in the direction of Nido Clef, because see here you have Nidoqueen supporting a T-Spike's offense kind of style, or T-Spike's balance, whatever you want to call it. And the X-Ray thing is, if in a non-Clef world, this would be perfectly good. T-Spikes plus Zapdos and Heatran, I mean, this is great. But Clef kind of invalidates it, so this Nido is better than that Nido. I remember when when we were first starting to get Nidoqueen mirrors, Goten versus Heist, SPL 6, so 2015, there were 2 Nidoqueens. And I think Heist was using a revised version of that team I mentioned before with Nidoqueen and Heatran. It wasn't Custap Heatran, he changed it. But, the Lucario and all that. And remember, there were 2 Nidoqueens, just mirroring each other. That wasn't even the only time that happened. That was just the one example I could name, but I remember it definitely happened multiple times. And I remember there was like a whole thing. Should you use Earth Power Nidoqueen so you can, or Earthquake? Because Earthquake means you got to go minus speed, and with Earth Power, I mean, it's worse against T-Tar, obviously, and just in general. But since you're already running a special attack as your second one, then wouldn't it be great if you could be a little faster? Because that natural speed stat is good into Breloom. And you've got the, what do you have? The, let me, kind of, yeah, sorry. I just totally blanked. I was like, what's that other Pokemon that I was just going to say? Oh, right, other Nidoqueen. And, in this Nidoqueen mirror, I remember one was faster because it was running Earth Power and the other was running Earthquake. So, I think Goten had the fast one. I think he was running the E-Power one. But yeah, here's Clef sitting on a Zapdos again. Thing of beauty. And the last is Bronzong. So this would be a perfectly fine team against non-Clef, but it's facing Clef, so it's, yeah, not so good. Anyway, so... yeah, and here we see Nidoqueen coming into Clef and just completely stuffing it. There's the knockoff, and hey, knockoff is an Oko move, as we like to say in the biz. So yeah, this game is very, very... and look, Nidoqueen combined, both of them combining to mess with Zapdos. Can the music continue playing, please? Yeah, okay, there we go. Let me check on that music. Oh, it's just being slow. Okay. So... we can also refer to some usage statistics. So that was 2017, this game, July 2017. And now we go to the 2018 SPL, and let me adjust oh no, the dimensions are fine. And we see, the usage, Nidoqueen is sitting at a nice, 75% win rate. I mean, okay, look, I'm the first to tell you win rate does not mean, is not the end-all be-all, but it does start the story off. And I think given all the other context we've seen, we see why Nidoqueen has been so successful. Funnily enough, Nidoqueen has identical usage to Dugtrio in this SPL, which is very funny because we haven't really seen Dugtrio in a while, but that's because there aren't really consistent... There was one really good Dugtrio team made, SPL, in 2017, I believe. I think it was Osgood who made it. It was like Swampert, Skarm, Rotom, Doug. Was there a Rotom? I think it was Rotom. Either way, if it wasn't Rotom, it was T-Tar or something. But the last two were Calm Mind Clef and Calm Mind Celebi. And it was, it was combining the classic combination of Calm Mind Clef for, other stall teams and Spikes. And you also have Dugtrio to really force the issue. And what's the issue with Dugtrio, theoretically? Oh, that something is going to take advantage of the free turn you give with its EQ lock and sweep you. And with such a bulky team, that's not really the issue. Now, if you're running more offensive Dugtrio teams, I mean, then again, this is just kind of an issue of offensive teams with choice users in general, or Pokemon that are just going to wind up giving setup. Lucario gives DD Gyara setup. That doesn't mean Lucario is bad. But I get the idea when you're so reliant on Doug's trapping to function that you wind up giving opportunities. But then it was eventually discovered that, hey, you know, the only thing that really truly abuses a Doug trap, you know, to the fullest extent is going to be something like DD Garrett or DD Knight, and Bold, Calm Mind, Clefable actually answers both of them. And to say nothing of the idea of using it on bulky teams in general. So that team of Osgood's was a very early example of that. And where's Clefable? Yeah, Clef is, you know, 16th in usage, ahead of Magnezone, Machamp, Roserade, Rotom, Wash. Well, okay, that's just Rotom, not all Rotom appliances. But yeah, Nido Clef is seeing very, very healthy usage. I remember we wanted to use that team, you know, every week this SPL, but we were like, you know what, let's save that team, iCrawl. Let's save it for when we really, really need it. So yeah, and then in 2019, the fall of 2018, Latias returns. And at first, people were saying you don't even have to change the most popular team. And sorry for the brag, I was involved in DPPOU a lot. The people were saying you don't even have to change I Crawled, which was already, you know, a very popular, successful team. You don't have to change it at all for Latias. It's still incredibly functional. And they were using it as an example of an established team that does not struggle with Latias at all. However, the return of Latias meant that Nidoqueen took a hit, and especially with the continued use of Clefable, because people were saying, oh, well, I'll just use Latias in the Nidoqueen slot. Now, they're not the exact same, but yes, Latias brings important resistances, such as to water, so you can't just CB Waterfall and bowl these teams over as easily. So that was a lot more popular, and the emphasis of Latias, you know, gives you another amazing Spikes immune Pokemon, and as we realize more and more the power of hazards, we want to be as Spike immune as possible, and when we want to be as Spike immune as possible, we are even less affected by toxic spikes. So with Nidoqueen's defensive niche being similar, then Latias kind of, then it drops. You know, you see SPL 2018, you've got that nice usage of, you know, 25th in usage, you know, with 8 uses, which, I mean, honestly, I think is pretty low, but, you know, see how successful it was. And here, then, in SPL 2019, you've got 3 usages, 32nd. You know, Dugtrio is not too much above it, but, you know, people hadn't really figured out Doug yet. So they were starting to get there, but, yeah, meanwhile, Clefable just, you know, continuing to truck on, 13% ahead of Gyarados. You know, good lord. So, I mean, this is still pretty tame compared to the Clef crazy heights we have ascended to nowadays. But yeah, there's the Nidoqueen falling off briefly because of Latias, but don't worry. The way Nidoqueen affected the game is still very much there. The way, you know, walls don't have to be passive, you know, and the way that they start choking the opposition out as opposed to just trying to wall forever. You know, that's that old Stall conception of, oh, Stall just wants to sit against you forever until you get frustrated and throw your laptop out the window. No, it's not like that at all. It's very active. You know, the greatest Stall teams are always the ones that put the clamps on you very aggressively. So, yeah, there's that. And then in 2020, this is when Dugtrio got figured out. And you remember that whole dynamic I just mentioned about, you know, Calm Mind Clef and Doug, Bold Calm Mind Clef? Well, yeah, now we see Dugtrio out being used more than Starmie. It's got a pretty nasty win rate. And Clef, I mean, even higher. You know, 6th in usage. Insane. So yeah, Doug Clef. And I won't harp on about the Dugtrio ban here because, again, this is what this video is for. But the general premise is, look, it's just too good. Yeah, that was substantial, Kev. Try again. No, the basic premise is that it is too much of a powerful matchup factor because of how much Calm Mind Clef beats with Doug support. And yeah, it's honestly as simple as that. But even other things like Zapdos or Heatran or Latias, my God, or Calm Mind Jirachi become, you know, or Heatran become a lot scarier with Doug. I mean, Heatran was actually a common Dugtrio victim, but not Scarf. Anyway, you get the point, and we won't harp on that. And another statistic I found is there's combination statistics of the most common Pokemon used together. And what's crazy is that in terms of Pokemon Dugtrio was most commonly paired with, as you see here, it was most commonly used with Latias and Jirachi, both being used 12 times each. The Latias-Doug combination had the higher win rate of 66%. And then it's not even the third most common. Doug Trio and Rotom, you know? And then Doug Trio and... where is it? Dude, I remember when I first looked this up, I was like, am I going crazy? Yeah, Doug Trio and Clefable is only the most... I mean, it was the defining broken combination of that SPL, but they were only used together 6 times. But, I mean... Now, again, I'm not using the win rate, but this was what was convincing people, yeah, this is kind of insanely busted. So, yeah, to find it as them being used together so... I mean, it was a progression, you know? It wasn't like the whole SPL, people were saying, oh, Doug Clef. But people were waiting for Doug to start doing something, because people, ever since Latias returned, people were like, dude, it's just going to be a matter of time before Latias does things. And then, you know, we were thinking of these, you know, terrible dual trap teams, like the cheesy M-Dragon one mentioned earlier. Sorry to call it cheesy and terrible, Mariano, but it was trying to win with Crest and a bunch of U-turners. It was not your best work. You are capable of so much better. Anyway, so, yeah, people were just waiting for it to be figured out, and then that's why we have all these replays in the thread of, you know, this early... actually, this one was just Doug Trio being used, and then this one was also just Doug Trio being used. And then this one, I think? Yes, this is Bihi or Baihai using a team I made. And this was the first instance of Doug Clef. And, I mean, it was not, you know, a combination I invented. It was just a matter of who's going to use it first. But this was the team used, and, you know, again, very aggressive despite the bulky Pokemon. And then Clef winds up just soloing, and it was largely enabled because of Doug Trio and Scarf. Actually, was it enabled because of Doug Trio on this one? I think it was more Scarf Tar. Yeah. Actually, yeah, Doug Trio did nothing in this game. It enabled the structure. That's what it did in this game. And it provided a nice sacrifice to Specs Kingdra Hydro Pump. And then Scarf Tar finished it off. So, yeah, Doug Trio actually would have been quite good here. But, yeah, you got to keep it for the Latias. Anyway, well, if it's Scarf. Anyway, so not the point. And Clef just solos here because people realize, oh, you can't even flinch it with Jirachi. So, yeah, people are like, oh, don't I need Doug to check Clef? Well, it's like, well, no, because it doesn't check Clef at all, and in fact, it just makes it worse to deal with when paired with it. So, yeah, that is the abridged version of how, you know, suddenly we realized, because we always associated Doug Trio. I mean, you saw those other teams, or if you're listening, you heard about those other teams, where they... It's like offense, and yeah, they were, you know, well built and relatively consistent for what they were. But when you're running such a fragile team with a Pokemon that is, you know, even offensive teams are going to struggle to switch into big threats. But you know, when you have this level of fragility in Doug Trio, then you're really going to struggle in a lot of matchups. So it was once people started pairing Doug with those bulkier cores, you know, like that early Osgood team, and then people figuring out, hey, this Latias thing can go like this, then that's when Doug Trio officially started going over the line. And, you know, I'm not going to say Clef paid for Doug Trio's crimes, because even if you take Clef out, it's just an unhealthy presence. You know, people would cite, oh, you know, why is it okay to switch out of a lead Zapdos on the first turn and have it U-turn into Doug Trio, and suddenly I don't have a T-Tar anymore? That's too much of a reward. U-turn to a fighter, sure. U-turn to a Doug, too much. So, yeah, and in SPL 2020, the Nidoqueen was used only twice, and it didn't win either time. Now, I don't remember the games. I don't know why it didn't win. It could have just been, you know, it had a win, but then it was choked or was used badly or whatever. But, yeah, so 2020, not Nidoqueen's time. So that's how Doug Trio affected it. You know, it was this continued realization, oh, Arena Trap really is that abusable. You know, because before it was like, oh, well, let's use it with these big electric types and Scarf Heatran and, you know, big flat. And then it was like, actually, it benefits the defensive stuff the most. So that's how Doug Trio goes all the way from UU to Ubers, which is absolutely insane. And Clef, I mean, also from UU to now, people want to ban it. You know, I made another video at the beginning of this year. I referenced it in my last video too, about should Clef be banned. People are talking about it right now as a potential broken thing. But what about Nidoqueen? How's it doing now? Well, in Jirachi's DPP Invitational from last year, then Nidoqueen actually experienced a little bit of a resurgence. And why is that? Well, you know what... well, we're not just talking about, offbeat Slowking teams like Seven Thunders is here, which, for the record, I like. And I remember I had a Nidoqueen Slow Bro team I made a couple years ago that I thought was pretty okay. Needed some tweaking, though. Anyway, yeah, and the Slowking version is just give it Nasty Plot so we can break through Clef. Anyway, point being that Nidoqueen experienced a little bit of a resurgence, as we can see in the usage, in that suddenly it is, being used 7 times, and, the overall usage, excuse me, I mean, this is a lot more games, so, overall, it's not like it was exploding in usage. Oh, let me adjust the dimensions, my apologies. But the fact of the matter is, if you actually watch the tournament, you say, oh, Nidoqueen is not just appearing sometimes. No, this is legitimate. It was being used at higher ends of the tournament, too. It was being used, in serious games. And I further point to this by pointing to the team that really reestablished it in the metagame, in my opinion, Piteous's team, which has been used a lot since then, after the success he had with it. And it is Nidoclef, but it is Calm Mind Clef. It's not, Scarm, Spiking, Superman, everything. No, it's just a balanced team. It's got, Latias and Bronzong and things, but it's just got Nidoqueen and gets those T-Spikes, and you're thinking, wait, Kev, you were talking about how useless T-Spikes are in the Superman Latias era. Well, remember, that's not the only team style. You know what another popular team style is? We'll get back to that replay, is Paraspam. And what characterizes Paraspam most of all? Machamp. And those Machamp teams with Blissey and Starmie and Zapdos or whatever, it's really good into those? Nidoqueen. T-Spikes in general, it's why I still like Roserade, but Nidoqueen is very sturdy because it gets those T-Spikes up, and you give it a little support against Starmie, aka the bare minimum, and you will get those T-Spikes up, and you mess with Blissey, and you mess with Machamp, and you provide a Machamp switch-in. Not just a Machamp switch-in, but something that can actually punish it for using Dynamic Punch. An incredibly unique position to have in the tier. There's no Rocky Helmet or anything like that, so with Poison Point, you actually potentially, if you haven't poisoned Machamp through T-Spikes already, you can beat it that way. So Nidoqueen has really found new life in kind of reminding us that its traits are still useful, because yes, in matchups against hardcore Superman stall teams, it's not going to be that great, but also it can be tailored to be good against those. That's why I said Taunt Superfang before. It's really, it's begging for someone to try it out. Anyway, so yeah, then you have the whole Machamp of it all. And being able to switch into and neuter Machamp like that is so, so huge. So, yeah, and then it enables Calm Mind Clef. Because, again, Nidoqueen's not really good into those Superman stall teams. Well, you know what is? Calm Mind Clef. Then you've got other really cool techs on this team, like Roost Scarf Flygon, so you can absorb knockoff from other Clefs. And Magnezone to force the issue against like Skarmory and to help against Jirachi. And Magnezone, I mean, there's so much synergy on this team. It's beautiful. Magnezone helps clear steals for Scarfgon late game. So yeah, great team, and showing that, and that is Nidoqueen's resurgence. And it's pretty much playing the same way it always did. And yeah, so in a nutshell, that is how these three went from UU and UU in the case of Doug and Clef to Ubers and maybe Ubers for Doug and Clef respectively, and from NU to a very solid OU Pokemon that completely it deleted Infernape for of all things, for God's sake, for Nidoqueen. So yeah, that is an achievement if nothing else, because again, just to reiterate, most lower tier Pokemon, they don't completely shift the landscape like these three have. So, and that is why I wanted to make this video, because it is what you hope for. Well, not every time, obviously, but that's the apotheosis of finding that great lower tier Pokemon to use in OU. So, yeah, that is basically it for me. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you enjoyed watching or listening, or however you want to, or however you participate in these. So yeah, thank you, and I will see you in the next one.